Hey everyone, welcome back to Watch and Carry. So we've got another project for a customer. This guy has ordered these two watches here. On the left you have the Casio AE 1300 and on the right you have the AE 1200, better known as the Casio Royale. And we're going to be doing a couple modifications to the watch, namely this right here. So we're going to be taking the masking, which is this bordered piece of plastic underneath the glass, and basically swapping them between the two watches. And then on the left side, you can see that we're going to do a negative display here just on the bottom portion. We're going to put some honey yellow filters here at the top. And then to the right side, we're going to be putting in a filter here in blue, and then also a yellow filter here at the top as well. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. All right, so I've got the 1300 laid here in front of me. We're going to flip this over, take out the 4 screws that secure that case back, and we'll leave the 1200 to the side for now. Also just a great screwdriver to use here. Anything that has a place where you can rest your palm and the top will rotate on that is really, really nice. Makes it a lot easier to work with. Okay, take our trusty toothpick here and we'll set that case back to the side. Okay, so now we've got the watch. 6 o'clock or 12 o'clock position, we're going to pry up as we've done in the past. You've got the main watch unit here. And you've got the masking here. And then immediately what I like to do is flip this over. A lot of times dust can get into the back of the case, which really isn't the issue. The problem is, you know, the material they use for this glass on both sides is so soft that even using something as soft as a microfiber to wipe away dust ends up causing some abrasions to the glass. It's a budget watch, it really won't matter, but to just minimize that, we go ahead and just cover that up and we'll set that to the side. Okay, so this is what we're working with here. So again, what we're going to be doing with this is transferring this watch unit along with the masking, which is this, into this case here. And then we're going to make the whole bottom of this display negative. So before we do that, we're going to disassemble this whole watch unit to its core parts. And to disassemble, it's pretty easy. We'll just flip this over. Make sure you have a nice soft surface to work on. I'm using this rubberized surface. And you're going to find these, actually we'll keep it on this side. You're going to find these clips here. And you'll just use something pointed to kind of remove those. And as I'm doing this, you'll notice the watch start to get dim and then kind of fade out because you're separating the battery from the unit. Okay, and we'll keep this to the side. Take note here that when you take this part off, there is a spring right here. So I push up on that, you can see it. And that spring should be kept in that hole. If it falls off, we can go over how to put that in later. So just be mindful when you take that part out. Okay, now to disassemble the rest of this, we'll flip this over now. Take something soft and point it and just gently pry up on the sides here to kind of lift the circuit board out. And then you'll have these two pieces here, which we'll go over later on. Okay. Next, we're going to be taking, we'll turn it back over, just kind of tap it a little bit. Or if that doesn't come out, you can pry this up a little bit like that. Set that aside. Okay, and then here what you're going to do is you're going to look for this big spring here where my thumbnail is pointing to. You're going to pull with your middle finger in the left direction and then lift from behind with your index finger like that and pull that display out. Okay, now in this housing here, you'll notice that there's a couple thin pieces of foam here. So what I like to do is I go ahead and just squeeze gently here to create a gap and get these foam pieces out. You can push them out or you can pull them out. Okay, and we'll set those to the side. Okay, and this is what we're going to be working with, is this main time display here. You might have some residual numerals showing. Okay, but those will go away over time. Okay. And then now that I've disassembled everything from this housing, I've taken out those foam spacers, we will put this back in this direction. Just remember, this big spring represents the 6 o'clock position, so the bottom portion of the display should be going here. And I know that these 3 dots are the 12 o'clock, which means that this is the bottom here. Okay, and then we'll take our masking, put that back on, like so. Let's grab a fine tip Sharpie. And what we're going to do is trace a line on the screen that is immediately below where my Sharpie is going over right now. And that's where we're going to be cutting. And the reason why we want to hide that cut line underneath this masking is so that way when the person looks at the watch, they don't see that there's a clear difference between where we've cut off the polarized display and where the factory polarized display will remain for the top portion of those 3 dials. Okay, so we're going to line this up here. Make sure it's nice and snug. Turn it over to its side. And I'll just kind of, in my mind, picture where that line would run and make a marking. Okay, and then we'll do it to the other side as well. Okay, we can set that masking aside. Great. And what we've got here is a piece of tape, and I'm going to connect these 2 Sharpie lines with the tape. Okay, and then we'll put our masking back on and see if the border of this tape is being hidden by this part of the masking, which is where we should be. Okay, so let's cover that back up, make sure it's in place, and kind of hold it up. And as we're holding it up, what you want to check for is you want to check that the border of that tape is not too low here, and it's not too high into here, because that's where you're going to be cutting into the display. If anything, it should be lower. If you're going to make a mistake, it should be lower, so that way we can always cut more. Okay, so I'm taking a look here, and it's not writing there, it's not writing there, so that looks pretty good to me. Okay, we'll keep that tape on there. Rotate this over, and then grab a straight edge and your Sharpie again. Okay, and we're going to put the edge of this comb right where that tape will be. And make a line. Okay, so that looks pretty good right there. Okay, we can go ahead and remove the display one more time. And then we'll keep our tape on. And I'll set it to the side, actually. Let's put it at an angle like this. Okay, and the tape is there for a couple of reasons. Number one, it's going to hold the display so it doesn't shake. And then number two, it gives me a little better grip to put my straight edge on rather than put it on the display itself. Okay, then what we're going to do is line up your straight edge again where you made that Sharpie mark. I guess you don't really have to make that Sharpie mark. I just do it because it's easier to see in the light where to track your knife. And we're using a hobby knife here, a scalpel. Okay. And once you have that down, go ahead and make a few passes, put it at an angle when you're cutting, and try to draw your hand in this direction. So try to keep the wrist straight and draw like this rather than going like this. So that way you apply nice, even pressure. Okay, I usually like to do 10 strokes in one direction. And then we'll repeat with 10 strokes in the opposite direction here. Okay, make sure you keep the knife at an angle. Okay, and then 10 in the other direction. All right, that looks pretty good. And what we've made here basically is a score line. Let's remove this tape off. And you can see what we've made here. Okay, so next thing we're going to do is loosen the glue that's holding the polarized filter to the display, and that way when we start peeling it up, it breaks cleanly right around that score line there. And so that's the reason why we make that. All right, so I'm going to get some materials ready off camera. All right, so these are some of the materials we're going to be using to remove that polarized filter. A couple items you can use to remove it chemical-wise are Goo Gone and Goof Off. I've used both, and both are great. I've actually had better success with the Goof Off, which is, among other things, if you look here in the back, an adhesive residue remover, and Goo Gone as well as an adhesive remover. For me, the Goof Off seems to work a little bit better, so I'm going to stick with that one for today's project. Okay, we'll grab our display. Okay, and we're going to try to aim for getting most of this Goof Off on this edge, and this edge here. Okay, so what I like to do is spray a little bit into the bowl. Okay, take a fat-tipped Q-tip. Get it soaked, and then just go around that lower edge here. And this one here. And as I've talked about in other videos, the way to think about what I'm holding right now is like a hamburger. Okay, you can see, I'm going to let that sit so that way it can start working, and I'll explain this to you. You can see here in the center, see if I can focus on this. You can see right here that there's a piece of a display or of the glass that's sticking up a little bit higher than this part here. And this part sticking up a little bit higher is the actual display. And to the right of the display and to the left of the display, you have some other materials that make up the whole watch unit. To the left, you have a polarized filter. And so what we're basically doing is loosening the glue with the goof off that's holding this polarized filter to the display, which is that prominent piece of glass right there. And as I start to pry up here later on, you're going to start to notice the lower half of the display get very dirty looking, and that will be the glue that's slowly starting to emulsify with the goof off. Okay, so that's what we're removing, is the polarized filter. Okay, we'll give it one more coating here. And I think according to the bottle, it says to just let it sit for 1 minute. Okay. All right, so as that's sitting down, we'll get some other tools ready here. The best things I've found to use are just a small pin. So this one is coming off my my trusty Swiss Army knife. Kind of cool. I got this as a gift from my mom for my birthday when I was 13, so it's been with me a lot of places. Kind of interesting that this is the main tool that I'm using for these watches, because it has so many good stuff on it. And then we've got guitar pick, which I've kind of shaved down one of the edges a little bit here. You can see I kind of made it a little bit finer. Okay, so I think that's enough for now. What we're going to do is take our pin, make sure your surface has enough grip so the display doesn't slip on you because the pin is sharp. Okay, you're going to put the pin in either this corner or that corner, but as long as it's in the lower half of the display, don't put it in the top half because that part's going to be left untouched. So again, using that analogy where you have the glass and then you have the polarized filter to the left, what we're going to do is put this pin above the glass but beneath the polarized filter. Okay, so we'll put it on the edge like this. What I like to do sometimes is just take this pin, drag it, and then you'll hear it skip down one step and land on another piece of material. And that's where you want to stop. So again, let me bring this to the camera so you can understand where I'm going. And I'll have you listen for that step down, okay? Okay, that's where it is. And then you'll push down with that pin. Push away from your fingers. There we go. And you want to push just enough to get a small lip of the pin underneath the display. And then what I like to do at this point is leave the pin inside, take my guitar pick and replace that, let that pin fall, and then now you can start working at the corner. Okay, so I'm going to set this down here. And sometimes to make it a little bit easier, what I end up doing is taking my guitar pick and spraying it a little bit with goof off just on the edge of it. So that way as I'm working down the display here, or the polarized filter, it's also applying more of that goof off. Okay, and you just rock this back and forth, and then we'll move to the other edge now. And you can see right there how dirty that lower display is getting. All that dirt is the glue. Okay. And then I'm going to stop the guitar pick just before that score line. Okay, don't want to go too far. All right, now that we're at the score line, what we're going to do is take the guitar pick, move it up, and then bring the edge of it right between the score line. And just kind of like work at it just enough to start lifting off along that score line. Okay, so do this. And if see right now it's not really biting. I'm not feeling the filter breaking along that perforated edge, so I'm gonna try my hands a bit. Get my scalpel again. I'm gonna make go back to that same score line, and just on this side make it just a little bit deeper. Okay. In fact, I think I'll do the whole thing. Because I've already made a track here with my score line, I don't really need a straight edge anymore. I can just kind of move back and forth here. And we're not pressing too deep. Okay. So that looks good. And then what I'll do is grab my tape, that little bit of polarized filter that came up with my scalpel. I'm gonna pick that up with the tape. And the reason I'm doing that is I just want to make sure that I don't rub with this finger that material over the main display, because I don't want to scratch that. Okay, great. And now let's try this again. So we'll go back to this edge, and there you go. You see how the guitar pick is now lifting on that scored line? That's perfect. And then we'll just gently remove. Okay, that wasn't that clean, so we have to go back a little bit. Okay, you can see here I'm struggling a little bit, right? It broke down instead of along the score line. That means the score line isn't strong enough. So again, I'm going to go back, go to the track, rescore that area. And just be patient with it. Again, pick up our debris here with some tape. Okay, and let's try this one more time. Okay, so it's still not going. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave that part there. I'd like this to all come off in one piece. Let's try the other end here. Okay. Rescore this side here. There we go. Now we got the whole thing off. Okay, and there's that glue underneath. So, you just have to be patient. You don't have to get it off in one sitting. I mean, it's okay if you have to break it off in small pieces. It just makes it a little bit easier. All right. So next step we're going to be doing here is saturating this more with some goof off, and I'm going to let this sit for about 5 minutes Okay, so take your Q-tip again and just saturate it there. And we'll let this sit for 5 minutes and let it do its magic, and I'll come back. All right, so we're back. We've let this sit for about 5 minutes, so we're gonna get our bowl of Goof Off ready here to the side. And we're gonna switch out now with these fine-tipped precision Q-tips. So we'll saturate this a little bit as well. Okay. And I actually decided I might as well show off one of the watches I finished for myself the other day. So this is the Casio AE 1300 1AV, I believe this is, or 8AV. There's so many different models of it. So this one I already made a negative display for this one. You can see that there. And then one of my friends on Instagram, his name is Arlodji, Arlodji. I'll put his information in the description. He sells these pretty cool adapters that allow you to fit a 22 millimeter band, NATO strap, or stainless steel strap in this case. I put my old Seiko wired Agam bracelet on this and just try to see how this kind of looks. So anyways, just a little fun ad here while we're working. Okay, so we've saturated our precision Q-tip. We'll dip it again, and then what you'll do is just make some small circles here. Okay, and then we'll recoat again with the thicker Q-tip, and then work at it with the precision Q-tip. These are, I think you can find these precision Q-tips at CVS, but the best deal I found, of course, is Amazon. I think you can get a pack of 800 of these for $8. So, and this is probably the longest process of the whole thing, is just reapplying and then removing. And you can feel as you're moving with the Q-tip where that glue still is, because there's a little more resistance. And you can just go back over those parts. Okay, and then every now and then what you can do is just take your microfiber towel or whatever else you're using and wipe in one direction. And then take a look, and you can see we got a decent amount of it off, but we still have a good amount remaining, so we'll reapply again. Gonna use the different end here now. Okay. All right. So I'm going to pause the video here just to save on footage, and I'll check back with you guys, and I'll let you know how much time it took me to do this one. Okay, so we're back. That took about another 5 to 10 minutes. So again, you know, definitely the longest part in the process that you have to do. But if you look at the display now, you can see we got that glue off, and then we still have that polarized filter here on the top. If you make a mistake and you accidentally start removing that top portion, or let's say when you're using the scalpel, you cut it. It's not that big a deal. You know, what you're cutting into is polarized filter, and you could just go ahead and replace that with a new polarized filter that you already have. Me, I like to keep the factory because number one, it's just nice to keep what we already have, and then number two, it you know, saves you on having to use you know, excess polarized filter. Okay, so that one looks good to go. We'll give it one more wipe here. Okay, so we'll set our wet stuff aside. Okay, and then the next thing you want to do is trace the polarized filter that you actually need to cut out. So, you know, fortunately I've already saved the piece that I removed here, so I can set my display to the side. I'll grab my polarized filter. So this is what I'm using here. This is called a linear polarized filter. The grade on this is 0 degrees, and the one I bought is an adhesive backed version, meaning that this is again like a hamburger. You have the polarized filter in the middle, and on one side you have a non-sticky side with a protective film, and on the other side you have a protective film that protects the sticky side. This one is not labeled, but just from experience I know that the part facing me right now has this protective plastic, but there's nothing sticky here. The other side also has a protective plastic that is sticky. So I'm going to lay this part down here. Okay, I'm going to take the factory polarized filter from the watch that I already removed and lay that down like this. Okay, actually, let me do it the other way because I want you guys to understand how to do the polarized filter. So I'm going to reassemble actually the watch really quick. This is a longer version, but we'll make it clearer for you to understand what exactly I'm doing. Okay, so again, to reassemble, you find that main spring here on the left, and that should be your 6 o'clock position. You're going to wedge the display underneath these two clips here, like that, and then pull back on this spring here with my left finger, and then put the display underneath that clip as well over here. Okay, and that should be secure and in place. I'm going to flip this over. We're going to take these two little foam spacers here. Okay, one of them is shorter, and that goes in the 6 o'clock position. Just tap it down until it's flush. You have another one here. Okay, kind of looks like that. All right, then you're going to grab this opaque piece of plastic. You'll notice here that one edge of that plastic is a little bit raised. You see these teeth here on the corner that are a little bit raised. The raised ends should be pointing towards you. And the bigger ends, you notice how this end is bigger than this. The bigger end should be in the 6 o'clock position. Like that. Okay, then we're going to take this other piece here. The 4 black pieces should be facing you, and that falls into these 2 tracks on the side. You're going to take your circuit board. The black square of the circuit board should be touching the inside of those 4 pieces, so we'll put it like that. And then these 2 contact points here on the motherboard or on the circuit board should be in the 6 o'clock position, so it should be like that. Okay, and you just lightly tap that down. Okay, and you can see here that when it's properly tapped down, these little white teeth from the case will protrude here and protrude here. Okay. Next, we're going to take our case here. Notice how in this case there are contact points here and here, and those are going to correspond to these 2 contact points over here. So obviously this should be rotated like this. Take note of your spring, which is going to be up here in this corner. And as long as that spring is in there, you're fine. Let's take the spring out so you can see what it looks like. Okay, notice that this end of the spring is fatter than this end. The fatter end should be pointing towards you when you're reassembling at this stage. So I'm grabbing it by the fat tip here. Okay. And if you need to know which hole to put it in, look at your contact points. Make sure that's in the 6 o'clock position. Okay. And then you're going to see these 2 holes here to the left. You're going to put it on the uppermost hole right there. Oops. Like that. Okay. Take our board here, reattach. Okay. And then we have a bunch of clips here. You need to clip down. 2 there, 1 there, 2 there, 1 there. And that should be good. Now, because you've essentially disconnected the battery, you need to reset the all clear function on the watch, which is actually what they recommend too if you're going to change out your battery. So to do that, you're going to find a hole that says AC. Okay, that's going to be right here. You're going to insert one end of a paper clip that you've bent like this. Insert one end into that hole, and the other end touch any other metal. So I'm going to touch right over here on the left. And that's how it should look when you're doing it. Okay, so again, touch a piece of metal here, and that's it. And that's now all cleared. Great. So now you'll notice that our top portions are working again, but you can't see anything in the bottom, and the reason is because we've removed that polarized filter. So if I take the one that we removed and I put it over the watch face, you'll see that we get our normal time back. And if I go ahead and invert this 90 degrees, you have your negative display. Okay, so what that tells us is that the orientation of the polarized filter determines whether you have a normal display or a negative display. And that's why I wanted to do this long process of reassembly, because when it comes to our polarized filter, which I'm going to take out again, okay, I'm going to put my watch underneath. If you don't know what orientation gives you that effect, you might be cutting and putting it on incorrectly. So when you get your polarized filter, before you even cut, before you even draw, just put the watch face down and then put the filter over it, and then just move it with your hands and say, hey, where is the most crisp display where I get a negative display look? Okay, and for me, just from experience, you can see the orientation I'm already cutting with these other ones that I've done, that this is the one that I want. Okay. So I'm going to lay that watch down, and actually let's cut from the left side here just to even out the filter. Let me see if I can move this here because of the reflection in the light above. There we go, that's better. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is take my fine tip Sharpie, and I'm going to trace out right here along the border. Okay, so that's going to be my cut. Another way to do it is you just take your old polarized filter that you've cut previously off the screen, if it's in one piece, and just put it on there, and you can trace that also. Okay, so now what I'll do is grab my handy Swiss Army knife here. This is the Super Tinker model, by the way, and we'll cut this out. And here we go. All right, let's lay that on top of our display now and see what that looks like. Okay, that looks pretty good. And you want to check the edges now. You want to make sure that this polarized filter isn't too far off the edge, and you want to make sure also that, of course, it's not too short. So this one I can see is a little bit too large on the side, so I'm going to trim that a little bit. Okay, that's fitting pretty well. And sometimes what you can do is set it down, and because this plastic border, the lip of that, is higher than the actual display, you can put the polarized filter in and just kind of move it, and it should stay within that housing. So I can tell that this is the right size. Okay. Now you can see here in the top I have a little bit of a gap right here. Tiny bit, but that's not too big a deal because we are going to be putting this masking over it, and then that will block that out and that won't be visible. Okay, so this looks good to me. One more look. Okay, that's great. So what I'll do is I'll set that to the side for now. I'm going to wipe down my display just a little bit so that we have a clean surface to lay this on top of. Okay, again, double check. That's the right orientation. Okay, I'm going to peel. Remember, there's two protective films here, so I'm peeling the one that is touching the adhesive side, right? So I'm peeling off. And then I like to lay it to one side to catch. Or actually, a better way to do this is top to bottom. So just push up until you feel it catch that score line. Okay. And then you can set it down like that. And then just rub it with your fingers. I like to go inside to outside. Okay, and then I'll take a blunt end of a toothpick here and just lightly go over the perimeter of that to make sure it's securely down. Okay, and then now what we can do is remove the protective film that's facing us. So I'll bring this up so you can see what that looks like. There. Sorry, these are really bad tweezers. So I'll do it like that. And then keep this part to the side, don't throw that away. And take a look now at your display and check for any air bubbles that you might have. So on this one, I can already notice right here on the top, right there, you see that? It's a little bit lighter colored. So that's one area I want to focus. So that's why we keep this film that we just removed, because I'll reapply that over it. Take my blunt end of the toothpick and slowly try to work those air bubbles out. If I were to just do this directly without this protective film, I would start scratching the polarized filter, and then that would be very apparent when we reassemble a watch. Remember, it's just like having a black car, right? Black is a nice looking color, but it shows any imperfection really easily. And so that's why we're minimizing our contact with that black display. Okay, so let's take this off and see how we did. Okay, and you can see that it's gone now. That's great. So take a look around the whole watch. Sometimes you'll notice these characters. You see how like this is gold and then parts of it are really bright yellow? That's just because you've put a little bit of pressure into the LCD. Over time, those will go away. So that's completely normal. Okay, sometimes you can even just lightly dab that and it will go away. Okay. So let me take a look here, and I can see another one here at the bottom left-hand corner. So I'm going to take my plastic film again. Okay. All right, so that looks better. And let's go ahead and put the masking on it. Well, let's wipe it first. Let's take a look at that. Yeah, that looks great. It's a few fingerprints I need to remove. Great, and that looks good. So we'll set this to the side now and grab the rest of our materials. All right, so we'll grab now actually the case of this. All right. Actually, you know what? Before that, let's do the masking. Let's do the yellow filters for this guy since we already have this open. So we're going to be putting in some yellow filters here at the top. So as always, I like to use these this color filters. These are just samples that they sell from Lee Filters, and if you find a color you like, you can order the sheets much larger. So what I've used in the past for that guy is this honey display here. And what's nice is you flip this over, it has a white background, and makes it easy to see what kind of color it is. And you know what I like to do is sometimes put the display over that and show that. So this is Oklahoma Yellow, code 767. Okay, let's put that to the side. All right, so we'll take our filters here, and actually I'm going to switch it. Oklahoma Yellow, I forgot, that's for a different version of the mod that I do. So for this guy, he ordered modification version E, and that's going to be yellow. Just basic 101 is the code number for that if you decide to order this yourself. We're going to flip the masking over, and we're just doing the top portion, right? So I'm looking to cut just enough to cover the top portion and hopefully get it done in one piece. So let's move this to the side like this. Try to maximize our filter life here. Okay, that looks good like that. Perfect. Okay, and then we'll just trace the top here, or to cut. And then these two bottom pieces, I can go ahead and remove those when I'm done. So we'll cut here. Okay, we've got our yellow filter. Give your yellow filter a look also. Make sure that it doesn't have any creases. Sometimes the creases can only be seen under bright light, and once you install it onto the watch, it becomes very obvious when a customer looks at it. So make sure that we don't have any creases. These filters are very delicate, so there will be some hairline scratches even in brand new filters that you get. But it's very hard to notice unless you're under really bright direct light like I am right now. And of course, once we put a display behind this, it'll hide those imperfections. Okay, so that looks good there. I'll bring up my cloth here, set that filter to the side, and then what we'll do is we'll get our glue ready. For me, I like to use just good old-fashioned super glue. And super glue dries very quick, and it's very hard to apply a thin layer onto this. You don't want to apply a layer that's too thick, because when you push that filter down, the glue will spread, and sometimes it will even spread into the areas of the filter that are visible on this side. And so now you'll have this beautiful yellow filter with flecks of glue in it. So what I like to do is just put a very thin layer, which is hard to do with just the bottle. So I put tin foil, wrap it over a bowl, put a very small amount, take another different fine-tipped Q-tip. Okay, just get a small amount, and then what we're going to do is just slowly outline where I know that filter that I just cut out will go. Now they also do sell adhesive filters, so just like the polarized filter was adhesive, they sell filters in this color that are the same. That way you don't have to mess with glue. I bought these leaf filters first, so I'm really just trying to use up all my supply before I have to buy those. Now you see where there's areas of clumps, you really want to spread those out. Those may look harmless, but once you put the filter down, they're really going to spread everywhere, and you want to minimize how much of that glue is spreading onto the area of the filter that will be visible. Okay, then we can take our filter here, give it a wipe. Okay, take a blunt Q-tip or a toothpick, kind of push down on the areas of the filter that are touching the plastic. Kind of like that, and then we'll Flip this over and take a look at how it looks. There we go. So that looks pretty good. Okay. I'll go ahead and give my filters a quick wipe. Just in the areas that are visible on the other side. And then the reverse side, just be careful not to push too hard because of the glue. Okay, the glue actually isn't really that necessary because the pressure from the back of the case itself will push that filter in, but I like to just add a little bit extra just to make sure, especially if the customer decides to change their own battery, that's relieving some of that pressure and it might shift the filter around a little bit. Okay, so now we'll go to our AE 1200 and we'll remove the watch unit from this. To do that, you just find where that lug is in the corner, take your lug removal tool. Careful of that spring bar that comes out like that. And we'll do the same to the other side. Okay. Put the bracelet to the side there. Remove the case back. Okay. Take a sharper toothpick, remove that main watch unit. Okay, take a look at it. So I can already tell this up here is the 12 o'clock position. So I'm going to rotate this from my orientation. Remove that out. Take the masking that we just finished up from the 1300, put that in the correct orientation. Small taps. Take our watch unit from the 1300 that we did the negative display on. Make sure it looks clean. Okay, put that in the correct orientation. Okay, next you're going to notice this long tongue here, and behind the tongue there will be these two pushers. Make sure the tongue is behind the pushers. Just push the tongue back a little bit like that while pushing down with your thumb like this. So this one, look, is off here. This one is off, so you'll hear it click. There. Push it back, push it back, push it back, push it back. That looks good. Okay. Now, because this is a brand new watch, I'm not going to go ahead and re-oil this O-ring here, but if you do decide to do that, you can use this lubricating oil. Don't use 409 or 409 WD-40. Remember, WD stands for water displacement. You're trying to keep water out of something, and in this case what we're trying to do is lubricate, so you'd use something like hops oil would be better. Okay, right there. Okay, then we'll take our case back and we'll make sure that it says 1200 on this because this is the 1200 case. So you can find that case number right there. Okay, reinstall this in the correct orientation. Take your screws. Put those in. Okay, screw down partially, not all the way. rotate which screws that you're doing, left side to right. Okay, so this case is still loose. I'm going to go around the perimeter right here and check to make sure that the O-ring is not sticking up or getting pinched. So that looks good. Now we can screw down all the way. Okay, turn the watch over, and that looks pretty good. Okay, when you do this, that spring that we talked about earlier is now making contact with the case back, and so it's automatically going to defer to this timer zone. You can just cycle through with the bottom left button. And now you can see that all your displays are working. Okay, at this point I like to run through all the functions to make sure nothing is wrong. Sometimes if you don't adjust that tongue here and the pusher isn't making good contact, some of these pushers won't work. So here I'm on the stopwatch. Good. Timer. Looks good. That looks pretty good there. And then once I'm done with everything, I